The alarm screamed across the Galactic Council's border station as Commander Vex stared at the display screen. His four eyes blinked in confusion as he watched the single dot moving toward their position. The readings made no sense. Only one. Ship approached their heavily fortified frontier, and it flew under a human flag. "Sir, the vessel is requesting diplomatic passage," reported Lieutenant Kale from the communications station. His voice carried the uncertainty that everyone on the bridge felt. Vex's scaled fingers drummed against his command chair. Intelligence reports had warned them about human fleets, massive armadas carrying weapons that could crack planets. Yet, here was just one ship flying alone through space like it owned the galaxy. The ship's designation appeared on his screen. Use Prometheus. "Get me Admiral Korath," Vex ordered. Within moments, the holographic image of the Nexari commander appeared before him. Korath's 6 arms were crossed, and his mandibles clicked with irritation. "What do you want, Vex?" Korath's voice carried the arrogance typical of his species. "We have a human ship approaching." "Just one. It's asking for diplomatic passage." Korath's compound eyes focused on the display. "One ship? Are you certain your sensors are working?" "I've run 3 diagnostic checks. There's definitely only one vessel." "Admiral..." Korath laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "The humans are either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Either way, this presents an opportunity. We can capture their technology and learn their weaknesses." On another communication channel, High Chancellor Drex of the Altarian Confederacy joined the conversation. His crystalline form shimmered as he spoke. This could be a trap. Humans are known for their deception. "What trap could 3 humans possibly set against our combined fleets?" Korath scoffed. "We have over 2,000 ships in this system alone." The debate continued for several minutes as more alien commanders joined the discussion. "Commander," Zoth of the Vorthic Empire suggested immediate destruction of the human vessel. General Quan of the Hegemony argued for capture and interrogation. Each species had its own opinion, but they all agreed on one thing. The situation was strange. Finally, the transmission from the human ship cut through their argument. "This is Captain Blake Harrison of the UES Prometheus. I repeat, we request safe passage to deliver a message of utmost importance to the Galactic Council. We come under diplomatic protection as outlined in the Treaty of Nexus 7. The voice was calm, almost casual. It showed no fear despite being surrounded by the most powerful military force in the galaxy. This composure disturbed the alien commanders more than any threat could have. "He sounds too confident," muttered Commander Vex to his bridge crew. "Why isn't he afraid?" Lieutenant Kale pulled up the ship's specifications. "Sir, the vessel appears to be a standard diplomatic cruiser. 3 crew members aboard. Light armament, nothing that could threaten even a single escort fighter." Vex studied the readings again. The ship's energy signature was unusual, but not threatening. Its size was comparable to a small transport vessel. Yet something about the whole situation felt wrong. The Council's emergency session lasted 2 hours. Representatives from 12 major species argued over how to respond. Some wanted to destroy the ship immediately. Others saw potential value in whatever message the humans carried. A few suggested the humans might be surrendering. During the debate, Captain Harrison sent several more transmissions. Each one was polite but firm. He would deliver his message to the full council, not to individual commanders. He would not deviate from his course. He would not submit to boarding parties until granted diplomatic immunity. The audacity of these creatures, snarled General Quan. They make demands as if they hold any power here. Perhaps that's exactly what they want us to think, suggested Intelligence Director Quinn. Their confidence might be manufactured to hide desperation. Finally, the vote was called. By a narrow margin, the Council decided to allow the ship passage. However, they would surround it with a massive escort fleet. If the humans tried anything suspicious, they would be vaporized instantly. Commander Vex received the order to coordinate the escort. Within an hour, 300 ships formed a tight formation around the small human vessel. Fighters, cruisers, and battleships from a dozen different species created an impenetrable wall of firepower. The human ship flew calmly through the center of this formation. Its movements were precise and unhurried. Captain Harrison acknowledged the escort with a simple "thank you for your hospitality" transmission that somehow made every alien commander feel uneasy. As they approached the main council station, more ships joined the escort. The formation grew to over 500 vessels, representing the combined might of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. The single human ship seemed absurdly small in comparison. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Cale, "the human vessel is transmitting again." "Put it through." Captain Harrison's voice filled the bridge once more. "Commander Vex, I want to thank you personally for ensuring our safe passage. Your professionalism is noted and appreciated." Vex felt a chill run down his spine. How did the human know his name? More importantly, why did he sound like he was making a list? The massive council station came into view. It was a technological marvel, large enough to house millions of beings and armed with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. Countless ships docked at its ports every day, bringing representatives from across the galaxy, the human ship requested. Docking Bay 94, a standard diplomatic berth. As it settled into the docking clamps, sensors confirmed what the escort had already reported. 3 humans aboard, minimal weapons, no obvious threat, yet every alien commander felt the same inexplicable unease. The humans had shown no fear, no hesitation, no doubt. They had flown into the heart of enemy territory as if they were visiting friends. "Sir," Lieutenant Cale spoke quietly, "shouldn't they be more concerned about their situation?" Commander Vex didn't answer. He was thinking about Captain Harrison's final transmission as the ship docked. The human had said something that kept repeating in his mind. "I hope you'll extend the same courtesy to those who come after." Those who come after. What did that mean? Were more humans coming? If so, when? And if they were confident enough to send just one ship as an advance party, what did that say about their true capabilities? The docking bay filled with security forces from multiple species. Armed guards surrounded the human ship from every angle. Energy barriers activated to prevent any possible escape. The most advanced scanning equipment available probed every inch of the vessel. Everything appeared normal. The ship's computer systems were standard diplomatic models. The crew quarters were Spartan but unremarkable. The cargo bay contained nothing but personal effects and diplomatic materials. Yet the feeling of wrongness persisted. As the airlock cycled open and the 3 humans stepped onto the station, every alien present felt the same thought. These humans were not what they seemed. Captain Harrison emerged first, followed by his 2 crew members. They wore simple diplomatic uniforms and carried nothing but datapads. They moved with the easy confidence of people who had nothing to fear. "Welcome to Central Station," announced Station Commander Rix, a tall Altarian whose crystalline body pulsed with nervous energy. "You will be escorted to temporary quarters while the Council prepares to hear your message." "Thank you," Captain Harrison replied with a slight smile. "We're honored to be here." As the humans were led away under heavy guard, Commander Vex watched. From the observation deck, something was very wrong with this entire situation. The humans were too calm, too prepared, too confident. They acted like they held all the advantages in a situation where they should have been terrified. The station's sensors suddenly detected a minor anomaly in the ship's communication array. It was still active, transmitting a low-level signal into deep space. When technicians tried to shut it down, they found the system was locked behind encryption they couldn't break. Commander Vex stared at the readouts and felt the first real fear he had experienced in years. The signal was transmitting constantly, sending some kind of message to an unknown destination. The humans hadn't just come to deliver a message to the Council, they were calling someone. The Council chamber buzzed with tension as representatives from dozens of species gathered to hear the human message. The massive circular room could hold thousands, but today it felt crowded with anticipation and suspicion. High Chancellor Drex occupied the central podium, his crystalline form casting rainbow patterns across the walls. Captain Blake Harrison stood in the center of the chamber, flanked by his two crew members. Chief Engineer Maria Torres stood to his left, her dark eyes scanning the assembled aliens with professional interest. Diplomatic Officer James Kane remained to his right, his hands clasped behind his back in a relaxed posture that seemed inappropriate for the circumstances. The humans were surrounded by a ring of guards from multiple species. Energy barriers hummed softly around them, creating a cage of crackling force. Weapon scanners swept over them continuously, searching for any hidden threats. "The Council recognizes Captain Harrison of the human vessel," announced High Chancellor Drex. "You may deliver your message." Harrison stepped forward slightly. His voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "Honored representatives of the Galactic Council, I come before you today to deliver a mission from the United Earth Government." A murmur rippled through the assembled aliens. Declarations could mean many things, but they were rarely good news. "The human government formally declares war on the Galactic Council and all member species for your unprovoked attacks on human civilian colonies," Harrison continued. "This declaration takes effect immediately." The chamber erupted in laughter. The sound was a mixture of clicks, roars, and electronic buzzes as different species expressed their amusement. Admiral Korath's mandibles clicked rapidly as he stood from his seat. "You declare war on us?" Korath's voice boomed across the chamber. 3 humans against the combined might of the galaxy? Have you lost your minds? Harrison remained calm. "I understand your reaction, Admiral. The odds do seem overwhelming." "Seem overwhelming?" scoffed General Kwan. "We have committed 4 billion troops to this conflict. Our combined fleets number in the hundreds of thousands. You have 3 people and 1 small ship." "Actually," Harrison replied, "we have significantly more than that. But you're correct that we 3 are not here to fight you." High Chancellor Drex leaned forward. "Then why are you here?" "We came to serve notice. To formally inform you that humanity has documented every war crime committed against our people. Every civilian transport you destroyed. Every colony you bombarded. Every child you murdered." The chamber fell silent. The accusations were serious, but the humans' calm delivery made them more disturbing than any shouted threats. "Intelligence." Director Quinn activated her translator. "These are grave accusations, Captain. Do you have proof?" Harrison nodded to Chief Engineer Torres, who activated a holographic display. The air above the chamber filled with images. Ships burning in space, colonies reduced to ash, bodies floating in the void. Each image was time-stamped and verified. "These recordings have been authenticated by our most advanced analysis systems," Torres explained. "They represent clear violations of the Galactic Convention on Civilian Protection." The aliens studied the images with growing unease. Many of the attacks had been classified. How had humans obtained such detailed records? "This is propaganda," declared Commander Zoth. "Manufactured evidence to justify human aggression." "The evidence is authentic," Kane spoke for the first time. "We have quantum-encrypted verification codes that confirm every image. Your own communication intercepts are included in the file." Several alien representatives shifted uncomfortably. The humans shouldn't have been able to intercept their communications. The encryption was supposedly unbreakable. High Chancellor Drex's crystalline form pulsed with irritation. "Even if these images are authentic, what do you hope to accomplish? You cannot threaten us with 3 people." "We're not threatening you," Harrison replied. "We're documenting your crimes for the galaxy to see." This entire conversation is being broadcast across every inhabited system. The chamber exploded in outrage. Representatives shouted questions and demands. How were the humans broadcasting? The station's communication systems were under strict control. "Impossible," snarled Admiral Korath. "Our security systems would have detected any unauthorized transmissions." Torres smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. "Your security systems are designed to detect conventional communication methods. We use quantum entanglement for our broadcasts. The signal cannot be blocked or traced." Commander Vex, watching from the observation gallery, felt his blood turn cold. The humans had been broadcasting since they arrived. Every species in the galaxy was watching this confrontation. "You're bluffing," declared General Quan. "Even if you could broadcast, what message could you possibly send? That 3 humans declared war on the galaxy? Who would take that seriously?" "The message isn't about our declaration," Harrison explained. "It's about your response. Every species watching this broadcast will see how you react to evidence of your war crimes. They'll judge whether you deserve to lead the galaxy." Intelligence Director Quinn accessed her data files. "Our analysis indicates that most species would support our actions against human aggression. Your people attacked our trade routes first." "Did we?" Kane asked quietly. "Or did we respond to your attacks on our merchant vessels?" The broadcast includes the complete timeline of events. Viewers can judge for themselves who started this conflict. The political implications were staggering. If the humans could prove the Council had initiated hostilities, it would shift public opinion across the galaxy. Many species were already uncomfortable with the Council's aggressive expansion policies. High Chancellor Drex attempted to regain control. "Regardless of who started this conflict, you cannot hope to win it. Surrender now, and we will consider clemency." Harrison's expression didn't change. "We didn't come here to surrender, Chancellor. We came here to deliver a message. That message has been sent." "Then you have achieved nothing," Korath declared. "A broadcast cannot defeat our fleets." "The broadcast wasn't meant to defeat your fleets," Harrison replied. "It was meant to serve as a beacon." The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Several alien representatives looked confused, but the military commanders understood. Immediately. A beacon was a navigation aid, a signal that helped ships find their destination. "What are you saying?" demanded Commander Zoth. "I'm saying that our broadcast has served 2 purposes," Harrison explained. "First, it documented your crimes for the galaxy to see. Second, it provided targeting coordinates for incoming human forces." The chamber sensor system suddenly activated. Alert signals began flashing as the station's long-range scanners detected something impossible. A massive gravitational distortion was approaching the system at tremendous speed. "Sir," reported a technician to High Chancellor Drex, "we're detecting an anomaly at the system's edge. It's moving at 97% of light speed." The main display screen activated, showing the sensor readings. The object was enormous, larger than any ship in the alien databases. Its gravitational signature was unlike anything they had ever seen. "What is that thing?" whispered General Quan. Harrison looked up at the display with satisfaction. "That, General, is why we only needed to send 1 ship. The UES Prometheus isn't just a diplomatic vessel. It's a targeting beacon. And what you're seeing on your sensors is the first response to our call." The gravitational anomaly continued to approach. As it grew closer, the sensors provided more detail. The object was artificial, clearly constructed, but its size defied comprehension. It was larger than most space stations, yet it moved with the grace of a fighter craft. "Impossible," breathed Admiral Korath. "Nothing that large could move at such speeds." "You're about to discover that humans define impossible differently than you do," Harrison replied. The alien fleet stationed around the system began moving to intercept the approaching object. Thousands of ships formed defensive formations, preparing to engage whatever was coming. Their weapons charged, their shields activated, their crews prepared for battle, but as the object drew closer, the sensors revealed something that made every alien commander's blood run cold. The massive construct wasn't alone. Smaller objects surrounded it, flickering in and out of normal space like ghosts. They appeared on sensors for brief moments before vanishing again. "How many ships are there?" demanded High Chancellor Drex. "We're having trouble getting an accurate count," reported the sensor technician. "They keep phasing in and out of our detection range." Harrison watched the confusion spreading through the chamber with quiet satisfaction. "You wanted to know why only 1 human ship arrived at your border. Now you understand. We only needed 1 ship to paint the target." The approaching fleet resolved into clearer images. The central construct was indeed massive, but it was unlike any ship the aliens had ever seen. It had no obvious weapons, no apparent propulsion system, no recognizable design features. It simply existed in space, moving with impossible grace. "What kind of technology is that?" asked Intelligence Director Quinn. "The kind that humans develop when you give us sufficient motivation," Harrison replied. "You thought you were fighting a primitive species? You were wrong." The first alien ships reached intercept range. They opened fire with every weapon they possessed, filling space with energy beams and projectiles. The attack struck the human construct and simply vanished, absorbed by some unknown defensive system. Then the construct responded. What happened next would haunt the surviving aliens for the rest of their lives. The human vessel didn't fire weapons in any conventional sense. Instead, space itself seemed to bend around it, creating distortions that reached out toward the attacking ships. When the distortions touched the alien vessels, they simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, but gone as if they had never been there at all. Harrison looked around the silent chamber. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the future of warfare. You're about to learn why humanity only needed to send one ship to end this conflict." ******. The alien fleet commanders watched in growing horror as their long-range sensors struggled to identify the approaching construct. The massive object defied every principle of physics they understood. Something that large should not be able to move at such incredible speeds, yet there it was, racing toward them like a missile. "Analysis complete," reported the sensor technician to High Chancellor Drex. "The object measures approximately 400 kilometers in diameter. Its mass readings are inconsistent with any known materials." Admiral Korath studied the readouts. With his compound eyes, 400 kilometers? That's larger than most moons. How is it maintaining structural integrity at that velocity? In the detention area, Captain Harrison and his crew sat calmly in their cells. They had been moved there immediately after the construct appeared on sensors. The aliens hoped that isolation might make them more willing to reveal information about the approaching threat. Intelligence. Director Quinn entered the detention block with a team of interrogation specialists. Her species was known for their ability to extract information from even the most resistant subjects. She approached Harrison's cell with confidence. "Captain, we need to discuss what's approaching our system," she began. Harrison looked up from the datapad he was reading. "What would you like to know?" "Let's start with the obvious question. What is that thing?" "We call it the World Breaker," Harrison replied without hesitation. "It's a weapon platform designed specifically for engagements like this one." Quinn's translator struggled with the implications. "A weapon platform? That entire construct is a single weapon?" "Not exactly. It's more accurate to say it's a weapons delivery system. The actual weapons are much smaller and far more sophisticated than anything you've encountered." Chief Engineer Torres spoke from her adjacent cell. "Your species developed impressive technology, but you never learned to manipulate fundamental forces. You built bigger guns when you should have been rewriting the laws of physics." "That's impossible," declared one of Quinn's assistants. "The laws of physics are universal constants? Are they?" asked Diplomatic Officer Kane. "Or are they simply the boundaries of your understanding?" The interrogation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the bridge. The construct had begun deploying smaller objects, and the results were disturbing. The alien fleet trying to intercept it was experiencing equipment failures that made no sense. "Sir," reported Commander Vex to Admiral Korath, "we're receiving reports from the intercept fleet. Their weapon systems are malfunctioning, but not in any way we can explain." "Explain that." "The ships are firing their weapons normally, but the projectiles are changing course. Missiles are turning around and targeting the ships that fired them. Energy beams are bending back toward their sources." Korath's mandibles clicked rapidly. "That's impossible. Projectiles don't just change course in vacuum." "That's what the fleet commanders are reporting, sir. The human construct isn't just defending itself, it's turning our own weapons against us." In the detention block, Harrison listened to the reports with interest. Your commanders are discovering the first principle of human warfare. We don't fight fair. We fight to win. How are you turning our weapons against us? Demanded Intelligence Director Quinn. We're not turning them, Torres explained. We're convincing them that they were always supposed to hit different targets. Reality is more flexible than your species realizes. You're talking about manipulating causality, Quinn's assistant protested. That's theoretically impossible. Theoretical impossibility is just another problem to solve, Kane replied. Your species gave up too easily when you encountered seemingly insurmountable challenges. The construct continued its approach, and the alien fleet's attempts to stop it grew more desperate. Admiral Korath ordered his flagship to lead a direct assault. The massive Nexari dreadnought charged toward the human platform with all weapons blazing. What happened next would be studied by military historians for generations. The dreadnought's weapons fired normally, but as the projectiles approached the construct, they began to slow down. Not gradually, but in discrete steps, as if time itself was being manipulated. Sir, reported the dreadnought's weapons officer, our missiles are decelerating without any external interference. They're just stopping. The missiles hung motionless in space for several seconds, then began accelerating back toward the Nexari ship. But these weren't the same missiles that had been fired. They had been transformed somehow, their warheads, replaced with something that made space itself ripple. When the transformed missiles struck the dreadnought, the ship didn't explode. Instead, it began to fade, becoming translucent as if it were turning into a ghost. The crew's final transmissions were cut short as the vessel phased out of normal space entirely. Where did it go? Demanded Admiral Korath from the command station. We don't know, sir, replied the sensor technician. It's not destroyed, it's just there anymore. In the detention block, Harrison checked his watch. Right on schedule. The probability cascade should be reaching critical mass about now. What's a probability cascade? Asked Quinn. It's what happens when you convince reality that certain events are more likely than others, Torres explained. Your ships exist in a state of quantum superposition. They're simultaneously present and absent, until observed. We're just changing the observation parameters. The implications were staggering. If humans could manipulate probability itself, then conventional warfare was obsolete. No amount of firepower could overcome an enemy that could rewrite the laws of chance. The construct had reached the inner system now, and its escort of smaller vessels was becoming visible on sensors. The alien fleet commanders got their first clear look at human military technology and realized they were facing something beyond their comprehension. The escort ships didn't move through space in any normal sense. They teleported from point to point, appearing and disappearing without any visible means of propulsion. When they fired their weapons, the energy beams didn't travel through space at all. They simply appeared at their targets instantaneously. Sir, reported Commander Vex, the escort vessels are engaging our perimeter defenses. Our stations are being destroyed faster than we can track. How many escort ships are there? We can't get an accurate count. They keep shifting between dimensions. Our sensors detect anywhere from 50 to 5,000 vessels, depending on which phase of reality they're occupying. The defense stations around the central system began vanishing one by one, not destroyed in spectacular explosions, but simply ceasing to exist. The human weapons didn't create debris or leave any trace of their targets. They're erasing our defenses, whispered General Kwan. Not destroying them, erasing them. In the council chamber, the remaining representatives watched the battle unfold on the main display. The human construct moved toward the central station with inexorable patience, surrounded by its ghostly escort, the combined fleet of the Galactic. Council threw everything they had at it, but their attacks were useless. How do we fight something like this? Asked Commander Zeotutai. Chancellor Drex's crystalline form pulsed with fear. We can't. They're not using technology we can understand or counter. The construct reached the station's defensive perimeter. The massive weapons platforms that guarded the Council's seat of power opened fire with everything they possessed. Planet-killing energy beams struck the human vessel and simply vanished. absorbed by systems that operated on principles the aliens couldn't comprehend, and the construct began to respond. Space around the station started to change, becoming darker and more oppressive. The laws of physics that governed the area began to shift, creating zones where matter behaved differently. "Sir," reported the station's chief engineer, "we're detecting massive distortions in local space-time. The construct is creating artificial gravity wells and negative energy fields. It's turning the space around us into a weapon." The station's defensive systems tried to adapt, but they were designed to fight conventional threats. The human construct wasn't using weapons in any traditional sense. It was rewriting the fundamental rules that governed the local universe. Sections of the station began to experience temporal anomalies. In some areas, time moved faster, aging equipment and personnel rapidly. In others, time slowed to a crawl, trapping defenders in moments that stretched for hours. "They're not just attacking us," realized Intelligence Director Quinn. "They're demonstrating their capabilities. They want us to understand how helpless we are." In the detention block, Harrison received a communication from the construct. The message was transmitted directly to his neural implant, bypassing the station's communication systems entirely. "Phase 2 is complete," he announced to his guards. "The demonstration is concluding. You might want to prepare for Phase 3. "What's Phase 3? asked Quinn. Harrison smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Phase 3 is when we stop being polite. The construct has been operating at minimal power since it arrived. It wanted to give you a chance to surrender before revealing its true capabilities." "That was minimal power?" Quinn's voice cracked. "The construct is powered by a controlled black hole," Torres explained. "What you've seen so far represents about 1% of its total output. We thought it would be sporting to give you a fair chance." The construct suddenly stopped its approach to the station. It hung in space like a dark moon, surrounded by the flickering forms of its escort vessels. The temporal distortions ceased, and the gravitational anomalies stabilized. "Why has it stopped?" demanded Admiral Korath. Harrison checked his watch. "Again, because the ultimatum period has expired. You've had 12 hours to surrender unconditionally. Since you haven't, the construct is preparing to demonstrate why we call it the World Breaker." 12 hours? We've only been fighting for 30 minutes. "Time moves differently when you can manipulate its flow," Kane explained. "The construct has been giving you 12 hours of subjective time to consider your options. From your perspective, it seemed like minutes." The construct began to change. Its surface, which had appeared smooth and featureless, started to open like a flower. Massive sections retracted to reveal the interior structure, and what the aliens saw there made them realize that everything they had experienced so far was just the beginning. The construct wasn't just a weapon platform. It was a factory, a research facility, and a military base all combined into one impossible structure. And at its heart, visible through the opening sections, was something that made space itself recoil in terror. "What is that?" whispered High. "Chancellor Drex?" Harrison looked at the display with professional satisfaction. "That, Chancellor, is a singularity drive, a controlled black hole that powers our most advanced weapons. And you're about to see what happens when we remove the controls." The singularity began to pulse with dark energy, and reality itself started to scream. Asterisk, 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 the singularity at the heart of the construct pulsed with malevolent energy, and space itself began to warp around it. The alien fleet commanders watched in horror as the controlled black hole started to expand, drawing in light and matter from the surrounding area. "All ships, fall back to minimum safe distance," ordered Admiral Korath, but his voice carried no confidence. There was no safe distance from what they were witnessing. The construct's true weapons began to emerge from the opening sections. They weren't cannons or missile launchers, but geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. The alien observers found that their visual systems couldn't process the weapon's true forms, creating a nauseating sense of wrongness. Commander Vex studied the sensor readings with growing terror. "Sir, those objects are registering as having negative mass." "That should be impossible." "Everything about this situation should be impossible," Korath replied. But we're facing an enemy that has made the impossible routine. The first weapon, activated with a sound that shouldn't have been audible in vacuum. It was a deep, resonant tone that seemed to come from the fabric of space itself. The alien crews felt the sound in their bones, in their minds. In their very souls, the weapon's target was a Vorthik battle cruiser positioned at the edge of the system. The crew of 800 experienced warriors had volunteered to test the human construct's capabilities. They believed their heavy armor and advanced shielding would protect them. Long enough to gather intelligence, they were wrong. The weapon didn't fire an energy beam or launch a projectile. Instead, it simply focused its attention on the battle. Cruiser and reality began to edit itself around the target. The ship's history started to unravel, not just its future, but its past as well. The cruiser's construction records vanished from databases across the galaxy. The memories of its crew members began to fade from the minds of their families. The raw materials used to build the ship retroactively reverted to their original states. "Sir," reported the fleet's intelligence officer, "we're losing all records of the Vorthak vessel. It's as if it never existed." "That's impossible," Korath declared, but his voice lacked conviction. "The ship is still there on sensors," the officer continued, "but everything else about it is disappearing. The crew's service records, their birth certificates, even their parents' memories of them." In the detention block, Chief Engineer Torres watched the alien guard's growing panic with professional interest. "Your species never learned to weaponize causality. You thought the past was fixed, unchangeable? We discovered that time is just another dimension to be manipulated." "You're erasing people from history," accused Intelligence Director Quinn. "We're editing the timeline to remove threats," Torres corrected. "It's more efficient than conventional warfare and much cleaner. No debris, no survivors, no evidence that the threat ever existed." The Vorthik battle cruiser began to fade from existence, its crew members vanishing one by one as their personal histories were systematically deleted. The ship's captain managed to send one final transmission before he too was erased. "They're not just killing us," he reported. "They're making it so we never lived at all." The transmission cut off as the captain's timeline was edited to remove his existence. The ship drifted empty for a moment, then vanished entirely as the construct completed its work. The alien fleet reacted with desperate fury. If conventional weapons were useless, they would try unconventional ones. The Nexari deployed their reality bombs, weapons that could fracture spacetime itself. The Altarians activated their consciousness disruptors, devices that could shatter minds across dimensional barriers. Every exotic weapon in the alien arsenal was brought to bear against the human construct. The space around it became a chaos of conflicting physical laws as different species' most advanced technologies tried to damage or destroy the impossible vessel. The construct weathered the assault without apparent difficulty. Its defensive systems adapted to each new threat, learning and evolving in real time. When the reality bombs exploded, the construct simply existed in a different layer of reality where the bombs had never been fired. When the consciousness disruptors activated, the construct's AI systems proved immune to mental attacks. They had been designed by minds that understood the true nature of consciousness and had built protections accordingly. "Sir," reported the fleet's science officer, "the construct is analyzing our weapons as we fire them. It's learning our capabilities and developing countermeasures faster than we can adapt." Admiral Korath realized that conventional military thinking was useless against this enemy. The humans had transcended the normal rules of warfare and were operating on a level his species couldn't comprehend. "All ships, prepare for ramming speed," he ordered. "If we can't destroy it with weapons, we'll use our ships as missiles." The order was desperate, but the alien crews obeyed. Hundreds of vessels turned toward the construct, their engines at maximum power. They would sacrifice themselves to damage the human weapon and protect their homeworlds. The construct's response was swift and terrible. It deployed what the humans called probability weapons, devices that didn't just destroy targets but retroactively ensured they had never been a threat. The ramming ships found their engines failing not due to damage, but because the probability of their systems working correctly approached zero. "Sir," reported a flight commander, "my engines are shutting down, but diagnostics show no problems. They're just unlikely to function." The probability weapons continued their work, convincing the universe that the alien attack was improbable. Ships that had been accelerating toward the construct suddenly found themselves drifting in the opposite direction. Weapons that had been primed to fire discovered that their targeting systems had never been calibrated. The most disturbing effect was on the crews themselves. Warriors who had trained for decades found that their combat skills were becoming increasingly unlikely. Veteran commanders discovered that their tactical knowledge was probabilistically improbable. In the council chamber, the remaining representatives watched the systematic destruction of their combined fleet. The humans had turned probability itself into a weapon, making victory impossible not through superior firepower, but by convincing reality that their defeat was inevitable. "How do we fight an enemy that can rewrite the laws of chance?" asked General Quan. High Chancellor Drex had no answer. His crystalline form had dimmed to almost nothing, reflecting his despair. The Galactic Council represented thousands of species and millions of years of technological development, but they were helpless against human weapons that operated outside the normal universe. The construct began moving toward the central station, its escort of phase-shifted vessels clearing a path through the remaining alien defenses. The station's massive weapons platforms tried to engage, but their targeting systems could no longer locate the human ships. "Sir," reported the station's defense coordinator, "our weapons are acquiring locks on the enemy vessels, but when we fire, the targets aren't where our sensors said they were. Are they using some kind of stealth technology?" "No, sir. They're exactly where our sensors detect them. But when we fire, it turns out they were never there at all. The probability of our sensors being correct is approaching zero." The construct reached the station's perimeter and began deploying specialized weapons designed for close-range engagement. These were different from the reality-warping devices used against the fleet. They were more precise, more surgical, designed to disable rather than destroy. The station's hull began to experience temporal shearing, with different sections existing in different time streams. The crew found themselves unable to coordinate their actions as causality broke down around them. "Sir," reported the chief engineer, "sections 7 through 15 are experiencing time dilation. The crews there are aging decades in minutes. Sections 20 through 30 are locked in temporal loops, repeating the same actions over and over." The construct's weapons were dissecting the station like a scientist examining a specimen. Each system was isolated and studied before being neutralized. The humans were learning everything they could about alien technology while demonstrating their complete superiority. In the detention block, Captain Harrison received another neural communication from the construct. He nodded and turned to his guards. "The analysis is complete," he announced. "The construct has cataloged all of your weapons, your defenses, your tactical capabilities. It has determined that your species pose no meaningful threat to human interests." "What happens now?" asked Intelligence Director Quinn. "Now we move to the final phase," Harrison replied. "The construct is preparing to demonstrate its ultimate weapon. I suggest you might want to contact your families and tell them you love them. Are you going to kill us?" Harrison considered the question carefully. "The construct is going to give you a choice. You can surrender unconditionally and accept human authority, or you can be removed from the equation permanently." "And if we surrender?" "Then you'll be allowed to exist as a client species under human protection. Your aggressive expansion will end, your military forces will be disbanded, and you'll contribute to the peaceful development of the galaxy." The construct's central weapon began to charge. The singularity at its heart pulsed with increasing intensity, and the space around the station started to buckle under the gravitational stress. "Sir," reported the station's science officer, "we're detecting massive gravitational distortions. The construct is creating a localized black hole that's growing exponentially." Admiral Karth realized that the humans weren't just threatening to destroy the station. They were threatening to turn the entire system into a black hole, erasing everything within dozens of light years. They're going to destroy the entire system, he whispered. No, Harrison corrected from his cell. They're going to give you a choice. Surrender now, and the weapon will be deactivated. Continue fighting and discover what happens when a controlled singularity loses its controls. The black hole continued to grow, its event horizon expanding toward the station. The alien crews could feel the gravitational pull beginning to affect their systems. Sir, reported the communications officer, we're receiving surrender signals from ships throughout the system. The fleet commanders are requesting permission to stand down. Admiral Korath looked at the approaching event horizon and made his decision. Signal all ships to cease fire and prepare for surrender negotiations. But Captain Harrison was shaking his head. I'm afraid it's too late for that, Admiral. The construct has detected weapons charging on 17 vessels. Your surrender offer is not being accepted. The black hole reached critical mass, and hell truly began. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. The black hole reached critical mass and began to consume everything within its expanding event horizon. The alien crews watched in absolute terror as their reality was systematically devoured by the growing singularity. Ships, stations, and even light itself vanished into the impossible darkness, but then something even more disturbing happened. The black hole began to reverse its expansion, not by natural physics but by human will. The construct was demonstrating that even the most fundamental forces of nature could be controlled and manipulated. Sir, whispered the station science officer, the singularity is contracting. That's impossible according to every law of physics we understand. High Chancellor Drex's crystalline form flickered with terror. They're not just controlling matter and energy. They're controlling the basic structure of reality itself. In the detention block, Captain Harrison received a final neural communication from the construct. He stood and faced his captors with the calm expression of a man who held absolute power. The demonstration is complete, he announced. The construct has proven that human civilization now operates on a level your species cannot comprehend or challenge. You have one final opportunity to surrender unconditionally. Intelligence Director. Quinn's voice cracked with desperation. What do you want from us? Complete submission to human authority, the disbanding of all military forces, the cessation of aggressive expansion, and most importantly, the acknowledgement that your species' time as galactic powers has ended. Admiral. Korath activated his communication system from the command center. Captain Harrison, we are prepared to discuss terms of surrender. There are no terms to discuss, Harrison replied. You will surrender unconditionally or you will be removed from existence. The choice is binary. The alien commanders looked at each other with growing desperation. They had ruled the galaxy for millennia, conquered countless worlds, and destroyed entire civilizations. Now they were being offered the choice between slavery and extinction. We need guarantees, demanded General Kwan. Protection for our civilian populations. Preservation of our cultures, some form of autonomy? Chief Engineer Torres spoke from her cell. You're not in a position to make demands. Your fleets are destroyed, your stations are defenseless, and your homeworlds are already being targeted. By similar constructs? Other constructs? Quinn's voice was barely a whisper. Did you think we built only one? Asked Diplomatic Officer Kane. While you are focused on this system, identical weapons have been deployed to every major alien stronghold. Your entire civilization is currently at our mercy. The implications were staggering. If the humans had deployed multiple constructs simultaneously, then every major alien military installation was under threat. The war wasn't just over in this system. It was over throughout the galaxy. Sir, reported the communications officer to Admiral Korath, we're receiving distress signals from Fleet Command. Similar constructs have appeared at Nexus Prime, Altarian Central, and the Vorthak homeworld. All military installations are reporting identical situations. The scope of human planning became clear. This hadn't been a desperate last stand by a dying species. It had been a carefully orchestrated operation designed to end the war in a single decisive blow. "How long have you been planning this?" asked High Chancellor Drex. "Since the first human colony was destroyed," Harrison replied. "Every atrocity you committed strengthened our resolve. Every civilian you murdered motivated our scientists. Every war crime you celebrated pushed us to transcend the limitations of conventional warfare." The construct began to approach the station. Again, its weapons still active but no longer targeting the alien defenders. Instead, they were systematically scanning every system, every database, every piece of technology the station contained. "Sir," reported the chief engineer, "the construct is downloading our entire technical database. It's copying everything we know about physics, engineering, and military technology." "Are they planning to steal our secrets?" Torres laughed from her cell. "We're not stealing your secrets. We're cataloging them for historical purposes. Your technology is centuries behind ours, but it might be useful for understanding how primitive civilizations develop." The casual dismissal of their technological achievements was perhaps more insulting than any direct threat. The aliens had spent millennia developing their weapons and defenses, only to discover that humans considered them primitive curiosities. "Sir," reported the sensor technician, "we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout the galaxy. The other constructs are all synchronized with this one. They're preparing for simultaneous action." Admiral Korath realized that the humans weren't just threatening this system. They were threatening the entire galactic civilization simultaneously. Every species, every world, every installation was facing the same impossible choice. "If we surrender?" he asked. "What happens to our people?" "Your people will be protected," Harrison replied. "Human civilization doesn't practice genocide. We prefer to assimilate useful populations and redirect aggressive ones toward productive purposes." "And if we refuse?" "Then you'll discover what happens when entropy itself becomes a weapon." The construct's weapons began to change again. The geometric shapes that had hurt to look at directly were replaced by something even more disturbing. They were simple spheres, perfectly smooth, that seemed to absorb light and heat from the surrounding area. "Sir," reported the science officer, "those objects are creating localized zones of maximum entropy. They're accelerating the heat death of the universe in small regions." The spheres began to move toward the station, leaving trails of absolute nothingness behind them. Where they passed, atoms lost their cohesion, energy dissipated into random motion, and the fundamental forces that held matter together simply ceased to function. "They're not just threatening to destroy us," whispered Commander Vex. "They're threatening to unmake us from the quantum level up." The alien leadership finally understood the true scope of human capabilities. They weren't facing an enemy that could simply destroy them. They were facing an enemy that could edit their existence out of the universe itself. "Sir," reported the communications officer, "we're receiving surrender signals from all major alien governments. The Nexari Empire, the Altarian Confederacy, the Vorthic Hegemony, and 37 other species are all requesting immediate ceasefire." But Harrison was shaking his head. "The time for surrender has passed. The construct has detected continued weapons charging on multiple vessels. The human government has interpreted this as a rejection of our terms. We can order them to stand down," pleaded Admiral Korath. "Orders are irrelevant now," Kane replied. "The construct operates on automated protocols. Once it determines that a species poses a threat to human interests, it initiates termination procedures." The entropy spheres reached the station's hull and began their work. The metal didn't rust or decay in any normal sense. Instead, it simply forgot how to be metal. The atomic bonds that held the structure together dissolved as the fundamental forces stopped caring about their former relationships. "Sir," reported the chief engineer, "hull integrity is failing, but not due to damage. The hull is losing its molecular cohesion. It's reverting to component atoms." The station began to come apart, not in explosions or structural failures, but in a gradual dissolution as matter lost its will to maintain complex arrangements. The aliens watched in horror as their most advanced technology was reduced to its basic components. The construct is preparing to extend this effect to the entire system, Harrison announced. All matter within a radius of 50 light-years will be returned to its pre-stellar state. The region will become a void of randomly distributed atoms. Hi? Chancellor Drex made a final desperate attempt. Captain Harrison, I formally surrender on behalf of all Council species. We accept human authority without condition. I'm sorry, Chancellor, but the construct has already made its decision. You had your chance to surrender peacefully. Instead, you chose to continue fighting even after we demonstrated our superiority. The entropy field began to expand beyond the station, reaching toward the nearby planets and moons. The alien crews watched as entire worlds began to dissolve, their surfaces reverting to clouds of disconnected atoms. Sir, whispered the communications officer, we're receiving final transmissions from the planetary surfaces. The entropy field is reaching the civilian populations. But then something unexpected happened. The entropy field suddenly stopped expanding. The dissolution process ceased, leaving the system partially unmade but not completely destroyed. What happened? Asked Admiral Korath. Harrison checked his neural implant. The construct has detected something interesting. It appears that your species' final transmissions contained something that changed the automated protocols. What did we transmit? Complete surrender. Not just military surrender, but the acknowledgement that your species' time as galactic powers has ended. A construct has interpreted this as genuine capitulation. The entropy spheres began to withdraw, their destructive work reversing as the construct demonstrated its ultimate power. The dissolved matter began to reassemble, not exactly as it had been, but in forms that the human weapon deemed acceptable. Sir, reported the science officer, the entropy field is reversing. The construct is rebuilding our systems, but according to different specifications. The station reformed around them, but it was no longer the same structure. The new configuration was more efficient, more elegant, and incorporated technologies that the aliens had never dreamed possible. Welcome to the new galactic order, Harrison announced. Your species will serve as client states under human protection. You will contribute to the peaceful development of the galaxy and help us establish the conditions for lasting peace. What about our independence? Asked High Chancellor Drex. Your independence ended when you chose to commit genocide against human civilians, Harrison replied. You forfeited your right to self-governance when you proved that you couldn't be trusted with advanced technology. The construct began to deploy construction drones that started building new structures throughout the system. These weren't military installations, but research facilities, communication arrays, and administrative centers designed to manage the transition to human rule. Sir, reported the sensor technician, we're detecting similar construction activity throughout the galaxy. The human constructs are establishing a new governmental structure. Admiral Korath realized that the war was truly over. Not just this battle, but the entire conflict. The alien species had been outmaneuvered, outfought, and ultimately absorbed into a human-dominated galactic civilization. How long will it take? He asked. The transition will be complete within 1 standard year, Torres replied. By then, every major alien population will be integrated into the human governmental structure. Your species will be given roles appropriate to your capabilities. The construct completed its work and began to withdraw from the system. But it left behind a clear message. A massive holographic display appeared in space, visible from every world in the galaxy. It showed the human flag, but beneath it were the symbols of every species that had surrendered. The message is simple, Harrison explained. The galaxy is now under human protection. War has ended. Peace has begun. And any species that challenges this new order will face the same fate you nearly suffered. The construct disappeared into hyperspace, heading toward its next assignment. Throughout the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out as the remaining alien governments completed their surrenders. The age of human dominance had begun, and it had taken exactly 1 ship to make it happen. Admiral Krelek stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the stars bend and twist as his massive fleet dropped out of hyperspace. Behind him stretched the most powerful armada in galactic history, 9,900 warships of the Vorthek Empire. Each vessel bristled with plasma cannons and energy shields that could withstand the force of a small star. The Admiral's 4 eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he surveyed his fleet through the VIEWPOR2. Commander Vex approached. From the tactical station, his scaled skin reflecting the blue light of the navigation displays. The younger officer carried a data pad containing intelligence reports about their target. "Admiral, our scouts confirm the human settlements are exactly as predicted," he said, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. "They have scattered colonies across only 7 star systems, minimal defense stations, and their largest military installation appears to be around their homeworld." Krellex nodded, his massive frame casting a shadow across the bridge. The Vorthak had conquered 17 species before these humans, each victory easier than the last. The pattern was always the same: discover a new race, study their weaknesses, then overwhelm them with superior technology and numbers. "What about their fleet strength?" he asked, though he already knew the answer would be disappointing. "Perhaps 300 ships at most," Vex replied, checking his data pad. "Our intelligence suggests they use primitive kinetic weapons, solid projectiles fired from metal tubes. They have no energy shields, no plasma weapons, and their fastest ships can barely achieve half the speed of our slowest vessels. Admiral, this will be the easiest conquest in our empire's history." The bridge crew around them worked with practiced efficiency, their movements synchronized after years of serving together. Navigation Officer Track plotted their course toward the human home system, while communications specialist Yev monitored the fleet's coordination signals. Every Vorthek on the bridge had fought in at least 3 previous invasions, and none had ever retreated from battle. Commander Wraith, the youngest officer on the bridge, studied the tactical displays with interest. "Admiral, permission to ask a question?" he said, his voice betraying slight nervousness. When Krellex nodded, he continued. "Our previous conquests were against species that had developed energy weapons and shields. These humans seem even more primitive than the Kaleri, who at least had basic plasma technology. Why are we deploying our entire fleet against such a weak opponent?" Krellex's expression hardened slightly. "Because the High Command has decreed it," he said. "The humans occupy systems rich in rare minerals our empire needs for expansion. More importantly, they sit directly in the path of our next target, the Zarian Federation. We cannot risk leaving any potential threat behind our lines, no matter how small." The Admiral moved to the central command chair, his presence commanding immediate attention from the entire bridge crew. "Besides," he added, "the High Command wishes to send a message to the galaxy. If we can destroy an entire species with overwhelming force, other races will surrender without fighting. This demonstration will save us time and resources in future conquests." Vex returned to his station and began coordinating with the fleet's other commanders. Through the communication system, dozens of voices reported their readiness. Battlecruiser captains confirmed their weapons were charged and ready. Troop transport commanders reported their boarding parties were prepared for planetary assault. Support vessels indicated their shields were at full power and their repair bays were operational. "All ships report ready for combat operations," Vex announced. "Our advanced scouts have identified the human patrol routes and defensive positions. The first engagement should begin within 6 hours." Krellex activated the fleet-wide communication system, his voice carrying to every ship in the armada. "Warriors of the Vorthek Empire," he began, his tone filled with ceremonial authority. "Today we add another species to our conquest list. The humans have lived in ignorance of our power for too long. They will learn what happens to those who occupy space that rightfully belongs to the Empire. Show them no mercy, for they would show none to us if their positions were reversed." The response was immediate and thunderous. Across 9,900 ships, Vorthek warriors roared their approval. The sound echoed through the communication system, a wave of predatory excitement that seemed to make the very stars tremble. This was the moment they had trained for, lived for. The chance to prove their superiority over another species. As the fleet moved deeper into human space, the first contact came sooner than expected. 3 small human patrol ships appeared on the edge of their sensor range, tiny specks of metal against the vast darkness of space. The human vessels were so primitive that the Vorthic sensors had trouble distinguishing them from space debris. "Shall we hail them?" asked Communications Officer Yev. "No," Krelex replied coldly. "Let them see what real power looks like." The leading battle cruiser opened fire with its plasma cannons. Brilliant streams of superheated energy lanced across space, striking the first human ship. The vessel exploded instantly, its primitive hull offering no protection against weapons that could melt through reinforced battle armor. The second ship tried to flee, but Vorthak fighters caught it within moments, reducing it to scattered fragments. The third ship managed to send a brief transmission before it too was destroyed. "Pathetic," muttered Vex, watching the debris drift through space. "They didn't even return fire." "Because they couldn't," Wraith observed. "Their weapons probably couldn't penetrate our shields even if they had hit us." The fleet continued its advance, encountering more human patrol ships over the next several hours. Each engagement ended the same way: complete destruction of the human vessels without a single Vorthic casualty. The Admiral began to wonder if the High Command had perhaps overestimated the humans' potential threat. "Admiral," called Track from the navigation station, "we're approaching the outer edge of the human home system. Long-range sensors are picking up increased activity around the inner planets." Krelex studied the tactical display, noting the positions of human colonies and defensive installations. Everything appeared exactly as their intelligence had predicted. A few orbital platforms around the third planet, some mining stations in the asteroid belt, and a handful of ships moving between the inner worlds. It looked like a civilization that had barely expanded beyond its home world. "Begin the final approach," he commanded. "All ships to battle stations. We'll eliminate their outer defenses first, then move on to the planet itself." The Vorthic fleet spread into attack formation, their ships moving with deadly precision. Battle cruisers took the lead, their heavy weapons ready to blast through any resistance. Fighters deployed in protective screens around the larger vessels. Troop transports moved to the rear, ready to deploy ground forces once orbital resistance was eliminated. As they passed the 7th planet, something appeared on the long-range sensors that made Track pause. "Admiral," he said, his voice uncertain, "I'm detecting some unusual readings from the asteroid belt." "What kind of readings?" Krelex asked. "I'm not sure," Track replied, adjusting his instruments. "The asteroids appear to be moving, but that's impossible. They're just rocks." Vex joined Track at the sensor station, studying the displays with growing confusion. "The sensor data shows artificial structures within the asteroid field," he said. "But our intelligence reports indicated the humans only had a few mining stations there." Admiral Krelex felt the first stirring of unease. In 17 previous conquests, the enemy had never surprised them. Every species they had encountered was predictable, their technology and tactics easily understood and countered. But something about these sensor readings felt different, wrong somehow. "Continue the advance," he ordered, though his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "But increase sensor sweeps. I want to know what we're dealing with before we get too close." The massive Vorthak fleet moved deeper into the human system, unaware that every ship, every movement, every communication was being carefully monitored and recorded. In the asteroid belt ahead, ancient human installations came to life, their crews preparing for the battle they had trained for their entire lives. Captain Riley pressed her palm against the scanner and watched as the massive blast doors slid open with a deep rumble. The command center beyond was carved directly into the heart of asteroid designation TX-447, its walls lined with displays showing every corner of the solar system. Dozens of technicians worked at their stations, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of tactical screens that had been dark for 50 years. Status report, she said, moving to the central command platform where General Torres waited. The older man's weathered face showed no emotion as he watched the approaching alien fleet on the main display. Behind him, the asteroid's artificial gravity hummed quietly. One of the few luxuries they had allowed themselves in this hidden fortress. The Vorthak fleet has entered the outer system, Torres replied. His voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were facing. 9,900 ships, just as our long-range scouts reported. They're maintaining standard attack formation, battle cruisers leading with fighter screens deployed. They have no idea what they're flying into. Riley nodded, taking her position at the tactical station. Around her, the command staff worked with quiet efficiency, their movements precise and practiced. These men and women had spent their entire careers preparing for this moment, studying every scrap of information about the Vorthak Empire, learning their tactics, their technology, their weaknesses. Perimeter sensors show they've destroyed 17 patrol ships, reported Commander Hayes from the communications station. All ships transmitted their final data bursts before destruction. The aliens are using standard plasma weapons, energy shields, and predictable attack patterns. Nothing we haven't seen before. Good, Torres said. Let them think we're helpless. The longer they believe that, the deeper into the trap they'll come. Dr. Elena Vasquez approached from the research section, carrying a datapad filled with technical specifications. Her team had worked for decades to understand alien technology, ever since the first Vorthak transmission had been intercepted by deep space monitoring stations. General, the countermeasures are ready, she said. We've identified 17 different ways to disrupt their energy shields and 43 methods to turn their own weapons against them. The main display showed the alien fleet moving steadily. Toward the inner system, their ships spread across millions of kilometers of space. To any observer, it would appear as an unstoppable force advancing against a helpless enemy. But Riley knew better. Every asteroid they passed, every piece of seemingly empty space, every drifting piece of debris was part of humanity's greatest military achievement. Initiate Protocol 7, Torres commanded. All stations report ready status. Across the asteroid belt, hundreds of hidden installations came to life. Asteroids that had drifted in space for centuries suddenly revealed their true nature, their surfaces sliding away to expose weapon systems that had been waiting in darkness. Mining stations that appeared abandoned began powering up fusion reactors that had been dormant for decades. Even the smallest pieces of debris revealed themselves to be sophisticated sensor platforms and communication relays. Station Alpha reports weapons armed and ready, came the first report. Station Beta confirms targeting systems online, followed another. Station Gamma requests permission to engage. Riley watched the reports flow in, each one representing years of careful preparation and engineering. The humans had taken every lesson learned from previous alien invasions of other species and applied them to their own defense. They had studied the Vorthak's tactics, their technology, their psychology, and had built their entire strategy around exploiting every weakness they could find. Remember, Torres announced over the fleet communication system, we're not just defending our home. We're sending a message to the galaxy. Any species that thinks humans are easy prey will learn otherwise today. The Vorthak fleet continued its advance, now only hours away from entering the asteroid field. Their sensors swept the area constantly, but the human installations remained invisible, their camouflage technology perfected over decades of development. The aliens saw only what humans wanted them to see, a sparse collection of rocks and abandoned mining equipment. General, called Lieutenant Marcus Webb from the tracking station. The lead elements of the alien fleet are approaching the outer marker. They're maintaining formation and speed. No indication they suspect anything, Torres smiled grimly. Then it's time to welcome them to our neighborhood. The first surprise came when the Vorthak fleet reached the coordinates they had identified as the location of human mining stations. Their sensors detected multiple structures, but when they moved to investigate, the buildings simply weren't there. Instead, the space around them erupted in explosions as hidden weapon platforms revealed themselves. "Contact!" shouted Hayes. "Alien ships are taking fire from automated defense systems. They're reporting multiple casualties." Riley watched the tactical display as red icons began disappearing from the alien formation. The Vorthak had walked directly into the first layer of humanity's defensive grid, a network of weapon platforms so well concealed that they were invisible until they opened fire. Each platform had been designed to fire once and destroy itself, ensuring the aliens couldn't locate and neutralize them. "Phase 2 activation," Torres ordered. "All mobile units, begin your approach." Across the asteroid belt, what appeared to be ordinary rocks began moving. These weren't natural asteroids, but carefully constructed weapons platforms, their surfaces covered with genuine rock and ice to mask their true nature. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy a Vorthak battlecruiser, and there were thousands of them. The alien fleet found itself under attack from every direction. Weapons fire erupted from asteroids that had seemed lifeless moments before. Missiles launched from hidden silos carved into the rocks themselves. Most terrifying of all, the space around them seemed to come alive with threats that materialized from nowhere. "They're adapting," Webb reported. "The aliens are changing formation and increasing their shield power. They're trying to push through the field. Let them," Torres replied. "The deeper they go, the more dangerous it becomes." Riley activated the communication system to address the scattered human forces. "All units, this is command. The enemy is performing exactly as predicted. Continue with the plan, draw them deeper into the belt. Make them fight for every kilometer." The Vorthak fleet, now reduced to fewer than 9,000 ships, pressed forward into the asteroid field. Their commanders had recognized the threat, and were attempting to blast their way through, using their superior firepower to clear a path. But for every weapon platform they destroyed, 2 more revealed themselves. For every asteroid they blasted apart, another moved to take its place. "Sir," Vasquez reported, "we're receiving detailed scans of their technology as they fight. Every weapon they fire, every shield they raise, every communication they send is being recorded and analyzed. We're learning their capabilities in real time." This was the genius of humanity's strategy. They weren't just defending their home, they were conducting the largest intelligence-gathering operation in human history. Every alien ship that fired its weapons was revealing secrets that human scientists would use to develop countermeasures. Every shield that was raised was being studied for weaknesses that could be exploited. "Phase 3 preparation," Torres announced. "All ships prepare for mobile engagement. It's time to show them what human engineering can really do." Riley felt a surge of pride as she watched the displays. The human fleet was nothing like the primitive vessels the aliens expected. Hidden throughout the asteroid belt were ships that had been designed specifically to fight the Vorthak, vessels that incorporated every lesson learned from studying alien technology. They were faster, more maneuverable, and more deadly than anything the aliens had encountered. "General," Hayes called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the alien fleet. They're trying to communicate with us." "Put it through," Torres said. The main display flickered, showing the image of a Vorthak commander. The alien's 4 eyes were wide with what might have been fear or rage. "Unknown defenders," the alien said. "We are the Vorthak Empire. Cease your resistance immediately and surrender your system, or we will destroy every living thing in this region of space." Torres stepped forward, his face grim. "This is General Torres of the Human Defense Force. You came here to conquer and destroy us. Instead, you found something you weren't prepared for. We don't surrender, we don't retreat, and we don't forgive." The transmission cut off, leaving the command center in silence. Riley looked around at her fellow officers, seeing the same determination in their faces that she felt in her heart. They had spent their lives preparing for this moment, and now it was time to show the galaxy what humans were truly capable of. "All stations," Torres commanded, "commence full engagement. Let's teach these aliens why they should have stayed home." Sub-Commander Wraith watched in horror as another Vorthik battlecruiser exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The massive ship had been there one moment, its shields glowing blue with protective energy, and the next moment it was nothing but expanding debris and superheated gas. Around him, the bridge crew of the flagship worked frantically at their stations, their earlier confidence replaced by desperate concentration. "Report!" Admiral Krelex demanded, his voice carrying an edge of fear that none of them had ever heard before. The proud commander who had led them into this system now stood hunched over the tactical display, his 4 eyes darting between the hundreds of red warning indicators that covered the screen. "We've lost over 3,000 ships," Commander Vex replied, his scaled hands shaking as he read the casualty reports. "The humans have turned the entire asteroid belt into a weapons platform. Every rock, every piece of debris, every abandoned station is attacking us. Our senses can't distinguish between real asteroids and their weapons until they open fire." Wraith studied the sensor readings, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The human tactics were unlike anything in their military databases. Instead of meeting the Vorthek fleet in open battle, they had created a maze of hidden threats that struck from ambush and disappeared before return fire could be directed at them. "Admiral," he said hesitantly, "I think we may have underestimated their intelligence capabilities." "Impossible," Krelex snapped. "They're a primitive species with basic technology. They can't possibly coordinate an attack of this magnitude." But even as he spoke, the evidence mounted against his words. The human attacks were perfectly timed, striking at exactly the moment when Vorthik shields were weakest. Their weapons seemed designed specifically to exploit vulnerabilities in Vorthak technology. Most disturbing of all, they appeared to know exactly where each alien ship would be before it arrived there. Dr. Elena Vasquez monitored the battle from her laboratory. Deep within the asteroid TX-447, around her, banks of computers processed the incoming data streams, analyzing every aspect of the alien technology as it was revealed in combat. Her team had spent decades preparing for this moment, and now their careful planning was paying off in ways that exceeded their wildest hopes. "The alien shield generators operate on a rotating frequency," she reported to General Torres over the communication system. "They change their defensive harmonics every 47 seconds to prevent sustained attack. But there's a 2-second gap during the transition where they're completely vulnerable." "Understood," Torres replied. "All weapon platforms, adjust your firing patterns to match the shield rotation. Target the transition gaps." Across the asteroid belt, hundreds of hidden gun batteries received the updated targeting information. When the next wave of Vorthak ships entered their firing range, the human weapons waited for the precise moment when the alien shields flickered during their frequency change. The results were devastating. Ship after ship exploded as human projectiles found their mark during those brief moments of vulnerability. Colonel Marcus Webb piloted his fighter through the chaos of battle, his ship weaving between the massive alien vessels like a predator hunting among giants. The human fighters were smaller and less armored than their alien counterparts, but they were faster and more maneuverable. More importantly, they were flown by pilots who understood three-dimensional warfare in ways the aliens had never imagined. "Blue Squadron, form up on my position," he commanded over the communication system. "We're going to try something new." His squadron of 12 fighters accelerated toward a Vorthek battlecruiser, their approach vectors carefully calculated to avoid the ship's defensive weapons. Instead of attacking the heavily shielded hull, they targeted the external sensor arrays and communication equipment. Within minutes, the massive alien vessel was blind and deaf, unable to coordinate with the rest of its fleet. "All squadrons, repeat the Blue Squadron maneuver," came the order from Fleet Command. "Blind them before you kill them." Across the battlefield, human fighters swarmed the alien vessels like insects attacking giants. They couldn't match the raw firepower of the Vorthek ships, but they didn't need to. Instead, they used speed and precision to cripple the aliens' ability to fight effectively. Sensor arrays were destroyed, communication equipment was targeted, and weapon systems were disabled with surgical precision. Fleet Captain Next commanded one of the few remaining Vorthek battle groups, his ships limping through the asteroid field under constant attack. His vessel had lost most of its external sensors and was operating on backup power after a human torpedo had somehow penetrated his shields and detonated inside his engine room. Around him, his crew worked to maintain basic life support while fighting off wave after wave of human attackers. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving distress signals from 37 different ships. They're requesting immediate evacuation. Our casualties are approaching 60%. Nex felt something he had never experienced in decades of military service: genuine fear. The Vorthik Empire had built its reputation on overwhelming technological superiority, but these humans were demonstrating that intelligence and preparation could overcome raw power. They weren't just defending their system, they were systematically destroying the greatest military force in galactic history. "All ships, form defensive circles," he ordered. "Concentrate your shields and prepare for coordinated withdrawal. We need to get out of this death trap." But even as he gave the order, Nex realized the humans had anticipated this move. The moment his ships began to group together, the asteroids around them revealed new weapon systems. Instead of the small guns and missile launchers they had been using, massive plasma cannons emerged from concealed positions. These weapons were clearly built using captured Vorthek technology, but they had been modified in ways that made them even more deadly than the originals. Captain Riley watched the alien fleet's attempted withdrawal from her command post, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and grim determination. The first phase of the battle was proceeding exactly as planned, but she knew the hardest part was still to come. The aliens were learning, adapting their tactics, and trying to minimize their losses. Soon they would realize that their only hope of survival was to retreat from the system entirely. "General," she reported to Torres, "the alien fleet is attempting to regroup near the fourth planet. They're concentrating their remaining forces for a coordinated push toward the system's edge." "How many ships do they have left?" Torres asked. "Approximately 4,000, sir, all of them damaged to some degree. Their communication systems are disrupted, their sensor networks are compromised, and their morale appears to be broken." Torres nodded grimly. "Then it's time for Phase 4, signal all mobile units to begin the pursuit. Don't let them escape easily." Riley felt a chill run down her spine as she transmitted the order. Phase 4 was the most dangerous part of the human strategy, the moment when their hidden fleet would reveal itself and begin active pursuit of the retreating aliens. It was also the phase most likely to result in heavy human casualties, as their ships would be forced to engage the enemy in open combat across the asteroid belt. Launch bays that had been sealed for decades suddenly opened from hidden berths. Carved into the largest asteroids, human warships emerged into the battle. These vessels were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, their hulls black as space itself and their weapon systems designed using a combination of human ingenuity and captured alien technology. The human fleet was smaller than the remaining Vorthok force, numbering only about 800 ships. But each vessel had been built for a specific purpose: to hunt down and destroy alien warships. Their crews were volunteers who had trained their entire lives for this mission, and their ships carried weapons that had been designed to exploit every weakness in Vorthek technology. "All ships, this is Admiral Parker," came the voice over the fleet communication system. "Today we don't just defend our home. Today we send a message to the galaxy. Any species that threatens humanity will face the consequences. Begin the hunt." "Subcommander." Wraith looked up from his sensor display as new contacts appeared on the screen. The human fleet was emerging from hiding, their ships moving with deadly purpose toward the retreating Vorthak forces. He had studied the technical specifications of human technology, and he knew their ships were inferior to Vorthak vessels in almost every way. But somehow, watching them approach, he felt more afraid than he had at any point during the battle. "Admiral," he said quietly, "I think we're about to discover what these humans are really capable of." Admiral Krelek stared at the approaching human fleet, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Everything he had believed about human capabilities was being proven wrong. These weren't the primitive, helpless creatures his intelligence, REPORTS, had described. These were predators, and they had just revealed that the entire battle so far had been nothing more than the opening move in a much larger game. "All ships," he commanded, his voice heavy with the weight of impending defeat. "Prepare for combat. We're about to learn why the humans have been so confident." As the two fleets closed the distance between them, both sides knew that only one would survive the coming battle. The humans had spent their entire lives preparing for this moment, while the aliens were fighting far from home against an enemy they had never truly understood. The outcome was no longer in doubt, but the cost would be measured in ways that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Lieutenant Commander Hayes watched the tactical display from her position on the bridge of the human flagship, her fingers dancing across the communication console as she coordinated the final assault. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet determination, their faces illuminated by the red glow of combat lighting. After 12 hours of continuous battle, the end was finally in sight. "Admiral," she reported, "all pursuit groups are in position. The alien fleet has been reduced to fewer than 300 ships, all heavily damaged. Their defensive formation is collapsing." Admiral Parker nodded grimly as he studied the display. The Vorthek fleet that had entered the system with such arrogance was now little more than scattered debris and a handful of desperate survivors. The space around them was filled with the twisted wreckage of alien warships, their hulls torn open by weapons they had never imagined possible. "Begin the final phase," he commanded. "But remember, we need survivors. The galaxy needs to know what happened here." Across the human fleet, commanders received their final orders. The last phase of the battle would not be about destruction, but about sending a message. The few remaining Vorthak ships would be allowed to escape, but only after they had been marked in ways that would ensure their story would be believed. When they returned to their empire, Fleet Captain Nex felt his ship shudder as another human weapon struck their weakened shields. Around him, his bridge crew worked frantically to maintain basic life support while the hull groaned under the stress of continuous combat. Of the 60 ships under his command at the beginning of the battle, only 7 remained operational, and all of them were too damaged to pose any real threat. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. They're offering terms for surrender." Nex stared at the communication display, hardly believing what he was hearing. In the entire history of the Vorthek Empire, no enemy had ever been in a position to offer them terms of surrender. They were the conquerors, the dominant force in the galaxy, the species that other races feared and respected. But now trapped in a system far from home, they were being treated like the defeated remnants of a broken army. "Put it through," he said finally. The display flickered, showing the face of a human officer. The alien's features were softer than those of a Vorthek, but there was something in his eyes that spoke of absolute determination. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had just won a victory that would be remembered for generations. "This is Admiral Parker of the Human Defense Force," the alien said. "You have entered our system with the intent to conquer and destroy us. Your fleet has been defeated, your ships destroyed, and your mission has failed. We offer you one choice. Surrender now, and some of you will be allowed to return to your empire to deliver a message. Refuse, and you will all die here." Nex felt the weight of command pressing down on him as he considered the human's words. His training told him to fight to the death rather than accept the dishonor of surrender, but his responsibility to his surviving crew members demanded that he consider their lives as well. Around him, his officers waited for his decision, their faces reflecting the same mixture of fear and confusion that he felt. "What message?" he asked finally. Parker's expression didn't change. "That humanity is not prey. That any species that threatens us will face the consequences. That the galaxy has a new power, one that will not be intimidated or conquered." Commander Zek piloted his damaged fighter through the debris field that had once been the pride of the Vorthek Empire, his ship's sensors struggling to navigate through the wreckage of thousands of destroyed vessels. He had been a squadron leader at the beginning of the battle, commanding 12 of the Empire's finest pilots. Now he was alone, his ship barely functional, his weapons exhausted, and his will to fight completely broken, the human fleet surrounded. The few remaining Vorthak vessels like predators circling wounded prey. Their ships moved with deadly precision, their weapons trained on the aliens but not yet firing. They were waiting for something, and Zek realized with growing horror that they were waiting for surrender. All remaining Vorthak vessels came. The transmission from the human fleet, "You have 10 minutes to decide. Surrender and carry our message home or be destroyed where you stand." Zek looked at his tactical display, counting the few red dots that represented the last survivors of the greatest military force in galactic history, 17 ships. Out of 9,900 that had entered the system, only 17 remained operational. The rest were either destroyed or too damaged to ever fight again. Dr. Ele Vasquez watched the final moments of the battle from her laboratory, her computers still processing the vast amounts of data that had been collected during the engagement. Her team had accomplished something unprecedented. They had completely analyzed an alien military force during active combat, learning every secret of their technology and tactics. But more importantly, they had proven that human intelligence and creativity could overcome any technological advantage. "General Torres," she reported, "the final phase modifications are complete. The surviving alien ships have been tagged with our tracking devices. No matter where they go, we'll be able to follow them." Torres's response carried a note of satisfaction. "Excellent work, Doctor. When those ships return to their empire, they'll be carrying more than just our message. They'll be carrying our eyes and ears directly into the heart of alien space." The genius of the human strategy was finally revealed. The battle had never been about destroying every alien ship. It had been about learning everything possible about their technology, their tactics, and their home territories. The 17 survivors would return to their empire carrying not just news of their defeat, but also tracking devices that would allow humans to monitor Vorthak space and plan their next move. Admiral Krelek stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the tactical display that showed the complete destruction of his fleet. The ship around him was a ruin, its hull breached in dozens of places, its weapon systems destroyed, its crew reduced to a handful of survivors. He had commanded the most powerful military force in galactic history, and he had led it to the most complete defeat any Vorthak commander had ever experienced. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "the humans are demanding our final answer, surrender or be destroyed." Krelex closed his 4 eyes, feeling the weight of failure crushing down on him. He had been chosen to lead this invasion because of his perfect record of victories, his understanding of alien psychology, his ability to inspire confidence in his subordinates. Now he would be remembered as the commander who had lost the entire Vorthak fleet to a species that their intelligence had dismissed as primitive and helpless. "Signal all remaining ships," he said finally. "We surrender. We will carry their message home." The response from the human fleet was immediate. The weapons that had been trained on the surviving Vorthak vessels powered down, though the ships themselves remained in position. Over the communication system came the voice of the human. "Admiral," his words carrying the weight of absolute victory. "Vorthak survivors, you will be escorted to the edge of our system and released. You will return to your empire and deliver this message. Humanity is not a conquest target. We are a predator species. Any alien force that enters our space with hostile intent will be destroyed. Any empire that threatens us will face retaliation. The galaxy has been warned." Commander Zek felt his ship shudder as human escort vessels moved into position around the 17 surviving Vorthak ships. The escort was clearly ceremonial, as the human fleet could have destroyed the remnants of the alien force at any moment. But there was something deeply disturbing about the way the human ships moved, like hunters allowing wounded prey to escape so they could track it back to its den. As the small convoy of survivors moved toward the edge of the system, Zek found himself staring back at the debris field that marked the grave of the Vorthek fleet. Somewhere in that expanding cloud of twisted metal and frozen atmosphere were the remains of 9,883 ships and their crews. The humans had accomplished something that no other species in galactic history had ever achieved. They had not just defeated the Vorthek Empire, they had humiliated it. The 17 surviving ships crossed the boundary of the human system and activated their hyperspace drives, beginning the long journey back to Vorthek space. Behind them, the human fleet watched their departure with satisfaction, knowing that they had done more than just defend their home. They had announced to the galaxy that a new power had emerged, one that would not be intimidated or conquered. Colonel Marcus Webb adjusted his fighter's trajectory as he led his squadron through the debris field that had once been a Vorthek battlecruiser. The human fleet had been engaged in active combat for 6 hours now, and the alien formation was beginning to show signs of complete breakdown. Ships that had once moved with military precision now fled in scattered groups, their commanders more concerned with survival than maintaining formation. "Volf leader to all squadrons," he transmitted, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. "The aliens are breaking formation near the 6th planet. Alpha and Beta groups move to intercept. Don't let them regroup." The human warships moved through space like hunting wolves, their black holes nearly invisible against the starfield. Each ship was crewed by volunteers who had grown up knowing this day would come, men and women who had trained their entire lives to fight an enemy that was technologically superior but lacked the human capacity for creative warfare. Admiral Parker stood on the bridge of the flagship Retribution, watching the tactical display as his fleet systematically dismantled what remained of the Vorthek invasion force. The aliens still outnumbered his ships by nearly 4-1, but numbers meant nothing when the enemy had lost the will to fight. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency, their movements precise and deadly. "Status report," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades preparing for this moment. "Alien fleet strength is down to approximately 2,000 ships," reported his tactical officer. "Most are heavily damaged and attempting to reach the system's edge. Their communication systems are still disrupted, and they're having difficulty coordinating their withdrawal." Parker nodded, studying the patterns of alien movement on the display. The Vorthek were intelligent warriors, but they were fighting a type of warfare they had never encountered before. Their previous conquests had been straightforward affairs. Arrive with overwhelming force, destroy the enemy fleet in open battle, then occupy the defeated system. But humans had refused to play by those rules. "Commander Hayes," he said, turning to his communications officer, "signal the pursuit groups. Begin Phase 5. It's time to show them what happens when you threaten our home." "Lieutenant Commander." Hayes had been monitoring the alien communications since the battle began, listening to their increasingly desperate transmissions as they realized the magnitude of their situation. The Vorthek language was harsh and guttural, but the universal translator software had little difficulty interpreting their meaning. What she heard in their voices was something she had never expected to hear from the galaxy's most feared conquerors. "Terror, sir," she reported. "We're intercepting increasing numbers of distress calls from the alien fleet. They're requesting immediate evacuation from the system. Some of their commanders are discussing surrender." "Denied," Parker replied coldly. "They came here to destroy us. They don't get to leave just because they're losing." Fleet Captain Nex watched his tactical display with growing despair, as another of his escort ships disappeared in a ball of fire. The humans had revealed a new weapon system, projectiles that seemed to phase through his shields as if they didn't exist. His science officer had theorized that the humans were using some form of dimensional manipulation, but understanding the technology didn't help when he had no defense against it. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving evacuation requests from 17 different ships. They're requesting permission to abandon their vessels and escape in life pods." Nex felt his pride as a Vorthek warrior warring with his instinct for survival. His species had built their empire on the principle that retreat was dishonor, but continuing to fight seemed like nothing more than suicide. Around him, his bridge crew waited for orders, their faces reflecting the same mixture of fear and confusion. That he felt. "Signal all remaining ships," he said finally. "Form up for coordinated withdrawal. We're leaving this system." But even as he gave the order, Nex knew the humans wouldn't let them go easily. The enemy had spent too much time and effort preparing this trap to allow its prey to escape. As his ships began to move toward the system's edge, human vessels appeared. From every direction, their weapons already charging for another attack. Dr. Elena Vasquez monitored the battle from her laboratory, her computers processing vast amounts of data about alien technology and tactics. Her team had learned more about the Vorthic Empire in the past 8 hours than human intelligence had discovered in 50 years of observation. Every alien ship that fired its weapons, every shield that was raised, every communication that was transmitted was being recorded and analyzed. "General Torres," she reported over the communication system, "we've identified critical weaknesses in their faster-than-light drive systems. If we can disrupt their hyperspace generators, we can prevent them from leaving the system entirely." Torres's response was immediate. "Transmit the targeting data to all ships. I want every alien vessel trapped in this system until we decide what to do with them." Across the human fleet, weapon systems were retargeted to focus on the alien hyperspace generators. The technology was complex and heavily shielded, but human engineers had developed specialized torpedoes designed to penetrate the most sensitive components. Within minutes, the first alien ships found themselves unable to jump to hyperspace. Trapped in the system where they had expected to find easy prey, Sub-Commander Wraith felt his ship shudder as another human torpedo struck their hyperspace generator. The explosion had been contained, but the damage was severe enough to prevent any attempt at faster-than-light travel. Around him, his crew worked frantically to repair the damage, but he knew their efforts were futile. The humans had deliberately targeted the most critical systems, ensuring that escape was impossible. "Admiral," he reported to Krelex, "our hyperspace drive is offline. We're trapped in the system until repairs can be completed." Krelex's response was a growl of rage and frustration. "How long for repairs?" "At least 12 hours, sir. Maybe more if the humans continue to target our engineering sections." The Admiral slammed his fist against the tactical display, causing the screen to flicker. In his long military career, he had never faced an enemy that seemed to anticipate his every move. The humans fought as if they had been studying Vorthak tactics for decades, exploiting weaknesses that even he hadn't been aware of. "All ships," he commanded, "form defensive positions around the repair vessels. We hold this position until the hyperspace drives are operational, then we retreat to Imperial space." But even as he gave the order, Krelex knew the humans wouldn't allow them to complete repairs unmolested. The enemy had demonstrated a level of strategic thinking that far exceeded anything in the Imperial military databases. They weren't just winning the battle, they were systematically destroying the most powerful fleet in galactic history. Captain Riley watched the alien fleet's attempted regrouping from her command post, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and grim determination. The Vorthak were finally beginning to understand that they had walked into a trap from which there was no easy escape. But she knew the most dangerous part of the battle was still to come. Trapped and desperate, the aliens might resort to tactics that could cause massive casualties among the human defenders. "All stations," she announced. "The enemy is attempting to establish a defensive perimeter around their damaged vessels. They're going to try to repair their hyperspace drives and escape the system. We cannot allow this to happen." Around her, the command staff worked with renewed intensity. The battle had been raging for over 8 hours, and fatigue was beginning to show on every face. But they all knew that this was the moment that would determine the outcome of the war. If the aliens escaped, they would return with reinforcements and better preparation. If they were trapped and destroyed, the message would resonate throughout the galaxy. "General Torres," she reported, "recommend we initiate the final phase of the operation. The aliens are contained and vulnerable. This is our best opportunity to end this permanently." Torres's response came immediately. "Agreed." Signal all units to begin the final assault. Today we don't just defend our home. Today we show the galaxy that humanity is not prey. The human fleet began to tighten its formation around the trapped alien vessels, their ships moving with deadly purpose. The Vorthak had superior individual firepower, but they were outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and completely demoralized. More importantly, they were fighting an enemy that had spent decades preparing for this exact situation. Admiral Parker activated the fleet-wide communication system, his voice carrying to every human ship in the battle zone. All ships, this is your admiral. The aliens came here believing we were weak and helpless. They thought they could conquer us without consequence. Today we prove them wrong. Today we show them that threatening humanity has a price. Begin the final assault. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Human warships accelerated toward the alien defensive formation, their weapons charging for what everyone knew would be the decisive engagement of the battle. The Vorthak Empire had sent 9,900 ships to conquer humanity, but they were about to learn that some prey fights back with a ferocity that predators cannot imagine. Fleet Captain Nex sat in his command chair during the long journey home, reviewing the battle logs and trying to understand how his species had suffered such a complete defeat. The humans had used their technological inferiority as an advantage, developing tactics and weapons that no one in the Vorthak Empire had ever imagined. More disturbing, they had fought with a level of coordination and strategic thinking that suggested they had been preparing for this battle for decades. As his ship limped through hyperspace toward the Vorthak homeworlds, Nex realized that his species had made a fundamental error in their understanding of the galaxy. They had assumed that technological superiority was the only factor that mattered in warfare, but the humans had proven that intelligence, creativity, and sheer determination could overcome any advantage. The Vorthak Empire had ruled the galaxy through fear and overwhelming force, but now they would have to live with the knowledge that there was a species out there that was not afraid of them. The 17 ships that had escaped the human system carried more than just survivors back to the Vorthak Empire. They carried the news that the galaxy had changed, that humanity was no longer prey but predator, and that the age of easy conquest was over. Behind them, in the debris-filled space around the human homeworld, the humans were already building new ships and planning their next move. The invasion had ended, but the war was just beginning. Admiral Parker watched the alien survivors disappear into hyperspace from the bridge of his flagship, his expression thoughtful. The battle had been won, but he knew it was only the first engagement in a much larger conflict. The humans had proven they could defend themselves, but now they would have to prove they could take the fight to their enemies. All ships, he announced. Over the fleet communication system, begin recovery operations. We have work to do.